And onto this now. The Good Party says former President Thabo Mbeki must account for the state's failure to prosecute apartheid-era crimes recommended by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Now, this comes after Mbeki's failed attempt to join a court case brought by victims' families against the state. And Mbeki and Mabandla argue that they should be given a platform to dispute their alleged roles between 1998 and 2008. But the High Court in Pretoria found that the allegations do not expressly name Mbeki or Mabandla, and that references to them are made only by virtue of the offices that they occupied at the time. The Good Party believes that former Presidents Thabo Mbeki, Kgalema Motlanthe and Jacob Zuma are best suited to answer questions on the state's inability to prosecute apartheid-era crimes. We now speak to Good Party Secretary General Brett Heron. Brett, good morning, and thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, Master Chada. Thank you.
Your party says Mbeki must account for the state's failure to prosecute apartheid-era crimes. What specifically should he be held accountable for?
Well, Master Chada, he was the head of the state who received the TRC report and recommendations with regards to prosecutions of those members who did not qualify, or those people who did not qualify for amnesty. And President Mbeki was the president of the country until 2008, and there were no prosecutions that took place. We then had the former National Director of Public Prosecutions, Vusi Pokoli, depose an affidavit 10 years ago in 2015, saying that there was political interference and he was prevented from bringing prosecutions during his time as the head of the National Prosecuting Authority. We've had almost 22 years since that report was handed over, and there haven't been any prosecutions or any serious prosecutions. The prosecutions that have taken place have been taken place because families have forced the courts to deal with inquests. And so I think former President Mbeki, instead of applying to be a party to the litigation, he should have applied to be a friend of the court, to inform the court as to why those prosecutions didn't take place.
Now, this 167 million rand constitutional damages claim involves over 20 families, including the Craddock Four. How important is this case for TRC victims more broadly?
I think it's very important. There were about 300 prosecutions that were recommended, the failure of the state to prosecute is unfathomable. If you think about it, we're talking about a state that was governed by a party whose political comrades were murdered by the apartheid state. And once they were in government, they seemed to completely forget the comrades that fought alongside them for the freedom of our country, and allowed this inertia or this paralysis, or they interfered, if that allegation is sustained, to prevent these prosecutions from taking place. So it's important for all of the families that have been waiting or have died waiting for justice. And our country is also, to some extent, held back by the failure to complete the transitional justice project.
All right. Now, you've criticized the state for making lower reparation payments than the TRC recommended and ignoring recommendations on economic justice. Can you elaborate on what reparations should have looked like versus what victims actually received?
Well, the victims received ultimately 30,000 rand each, and not all the victims received payment. A President's Fund was established. The President's Fund has currently got about 2 billion rand in it, and is it's actually earning more on interest from the money in the bank than it is spending on reparations, and that has been going on for about a decade. And the TRC recommended that in order to narrow the inequality in our country, that a wealth tax be imposed on the wealthiest South Africans. And at the time that those proposals were made, South Africa had just come out of its apartheid era into the democratic era. And South Africans broadly were waiting for a transformation project like this, or transformation processes like these to be implemented. And it would have been, I think, acceptable to the vast majority of South Africans if they had been implemented at that time. But as 30 years have gone on since democracy, I think South Africans, the appetite for that kind of change is no longer there. And we will probably see resistance to those kinds of projects being implemented now.
Now, nearly 30 years after the TRC was established, why are these prosecutions still not happening? I mean, who bears the responsibility for this ongoing failure?
Well, there's obviously the allegation of political interference, and that's why the Commission of Inquiry has been established by the President Ramaphosa. And there are three presidents who need to give evidence in that Commission of Inquiry: Mbeki, Mutante, and Zuma, who presided over the state during the decades when no prosecutions took place. 30 years later, a lot of the evidence is lost, and a lot of the accused, the people that need to be prosecuted, have died. And so we're losing time, and where there is an opportunity to prosecute, that should happen with urgency. And I think that the civil litigation that families are bringing is putting pressure on the National Prosecuting Authority to get their act together and to start prosecuting where they can. And we saw recently a prosecution in Gauteng, I think it was. So there have been one or two in the last year.
Now, Brett, but your leader, Patricia de Lille, has been serving as a minister in ANC governments since 2019, well, before the GNU was formed. So how do you respond to critics who say your party shares responsibility for the continued failure to prosecute TRC cases, as your party has been an active participant in that same government through Patricia de Lille's ministerial role for the past 5 years?
I mean, Patricia de Lille served in the 2019 to 2024 cabinet, not as a coalition partner, but out of the tradition where an opposition leader is serving in cabinet. But the Good Party was only formed in 2019 and may be the only political party who continuously raised the TRC prosecutions and the failure to prosecute the TRC atrocities or the crimes that the TRC found and handed over to the state. We're the only party that has been raising it in Parliament since 2019, and we were only formed in 2019. So I think the criticism, if there is any, is misplaced, because the facts speak for themselves. If anyone is really interested in what the Good Party has been saying about the TRC prosecutions, they need only go back to the parliamentary record from 2019 and see which party has been raising the failure of the state to prosecute these atrocities.
Now, Judge Miller said the appropriate forum for Mbeki and Mabandla to tell their side is at the Commission of Inquiry. Will your party participate in or monitor these proceedings?
We will definitely monitor the proceedings. We will have to see once whether there is if there's any value, if there's any reason for us to participate. To participate would be to give evidence, and as a party, we have no independent evidence that is probably not available already to the Commission. But we will monitor the proceedings, and if it's necessary, and if we can be of assistance to the Commission, and that may well be in the space of raising concerns that we have been raising in Parliament and the answers to the questions we've been getting, then we will participate, of course.
And the judge also ruled that political interference in TRC prosecutions has already been established by previous court findings. And given this judicial acknowledgement, what concrete steps should government take now to ensure prosecutions finally do proceed? All right. I think there is a technical issue, but let me ask the question again. With the judge having ruled that political interference in the TRC prosecutions, has already been established by previous court findings, and bearing in mind that this judicial acknowledgement, what concrete steps should government take now to ensure prosecutions finally do proceed?
Well, I mean, the National Prosecuting Authority is independent by law, and if there's been prosecutorial interference, and that's a crime. And I hope that if it is established that there was interference, then those who interfered will be prosecuted themselves, because it's been a grave injustice to hundreds of families around the country. So the statement by the court that there was, or has already been established that there was prosecutorial interference, is something for the state to be worried about. I'm not sure that it was as part of the judgment. It was a comment that was made, or in other words, it's not part of the finding of the court. But the fact that there's acknowledgement, judicial acknowledgement of political interference, the fact that Vusi Pokoli deposed this affidavit blatantly saying that there was interference as far back as 2015 requires action, and that action lies in the space of the National Prosecuting Authority. And if there's no longer political interference, then we need to see some prosecutions taking place of both the perpetrators of apartheid crimes and also those who interfered in the prosecutions.
Now, Brett, while I still have you here, very briefly, let me shift to some of the current issues facing the government of national unity that your party is part of. Where does the Good Party stand amid these explosive corruption allegations against various ministers and the bombshell revelations made by General Mkhwanazi in his recent media briefing?
Well, I think that let's start with the bombshell allegations by General Mkhwanazi. They contaminate the entire criminal justice system. He referred to the judiciary, the prosecuting authority, senior police officers, and even the Minister of Police, so the political office bearers, which makes it almost impossible, entirely impossible, for the police services, including the Hawks, to conduct the investigation into the allegations. The President appointed a commission of inquiry, which we said at the time was probably not the right way to investigate these allegations, and that the Special Investigating Unit may be the only crime-fighting unit that has the public credibility to conduct an investigation where the outcome of that investigation would be widely accepted. And so it is still our hope that the SIU will be mandated by the President to conduct a criminal investigation into the allegations by Mkhwanazi, and the SIU Act authorizes the SIU to do that kind of investigation. So the Commission of Inquiry may help us determine the best way to improve our policing, but ultimately all they will do is produce a report that still has to be investigated in order for a prosecution to take place, or prosecutions to take place. So we're hoping that a real investigation will take place by a credible body, and that body in our view is the SIU.